Welcome to the Programming Lines podcast, where we are on a mission to be more productive humans in mind, body, and spirit. And do we have a guest in store for you today? Carrie Sheffield has joined us. She has a decorated career as a journalist, broadcaster, and author. You have likely seen her as a contributor on every major media outlet, from Fox, CNN, MSNBC, Bill Maher, and more. She's also authored the book Motorhome Prophecies, where she tells her personal story of growing up with trauma and a difficult childhood and turning her mindset from victim into success. We have a lot to cover, so let's get into it. Carrie, thanks so much for coming on the Programming Lines podcast. It's amazing to have you here. We've been following your career for a while and all the things that you've done. And then most recently, you wrote this book, Motorhome Prophecies. We've seen you on some of the biggest stages in news broadcasting as a contributor and a commentator. We share a lot of the values and perspectives that you bring to the table. So we just wanted to say off the bat that we really appreciate what you do and the voice that you've brought to media.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. And Will and Max, it's great to connect with you guys. And it's just fun to have people from my past come into the future, into my current life.
And for the audience, there's an interesting connection here. My wife and Carrie went to high school for a bit together and played in the same orchestra.
Yeah, I don't remember what number, because I went to 17 public schools and homeschool. I should figure out the number, but I think it was somewhere in, might have been school number 12. Around there.
Wow.
That's wild. Let's get into things with Motorhome Prophecies. What inspired you to write this and tell your story in such detail?
Yeah, thanks for holding that book up. I'll hold my book up too. We got matching books there.
Yeah.
So yeah, the book, I wrote it because I've had a lot of people tell me that my life is like a movie or my life is like a book. I've had many people tell me that over the years when I chose to tell them what was going on in my life. I didn't really know Lauren, your wife, your mom, very well, so she didn't really know what was going on. Most people in my life did not know what was going on because I was afraid and I was in shame because I didn't understand what was going on to some degree. And then the things that I did understand, I wanted to hide. And finally, I got to the point when I saw, especially what's happening in our country right now with mental illness and people choosing to be a victim. I think a victim mentality keeps you trapped in mental illness. And unfortunately, I've had a lot of mental illness in my family, but I've been able to overcome it in my own life. And I wanted to share how to do that and the tools that worked for me.
Right. Well, that's amazing. We appreciate you coming out with your story. And I think that's a great segue into one of the first questions that the boys had.
In your book, you showcase a no victim mentality. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. Thanks, Max. Yeah, so the victim mentality is this idea that the world is against me and I'm stuck, and because I'm a girl or because I'm a certain race or I'm disabled or whatever it is, that the world is against me. And so everybody should always just feel bad for me. And I should always feel bad for myself. And I think that is a really self-defeating mentality. For me, I was a victim in a lot of ways. I had a lot of abuse from my dad and my brothers. And so I was a victim. But the question is, do I choose to remain in my mind as a victim? Because you can be a victim in how people treat you, but then you choose how to define yourself. And so if you choose not to define yourself as a victim, then you won't be a victim. And so your mind shift will get you out of that mindset, and then your world will change. And so I wrote the book because I wanted it to be a story of someone who was a victim. And honestly, there were times, I'm very honest in the book, sometimes I made choices that I regret because I still thought of myself as a victim. What I found is that the more you think that way, then you actually make worse choices.
I really appreciate you bringing your story out because it seems like victim mentality is actually rising in terms of trends. And so when we have people like you telling powerful stories about overcoming it, it really means a lot. And hopefully you'll inspire a lot more people to take the challenges in their life and just find a path through it. It's not easy, but like a lot of people do have difficulties in their lives, and you can either focus on that or you can focus on moving forward. And so for those reasons, I love your story.
Thank you. And I think it's really important because I do agree with you that I think the victim mentality is growing, and that's a choice at the end of the day. So that's why I wrote the book, is to say victim mentality is a choice.
You were raised in a very large family that had struggles. What makes a very strong family like United?
Yeah, so I talk in the book, the title is called Motorhome Prophecies because we spent large parts of my childhood living in a motorhome with my 7 biological siblings and my parents. So 10 people living in a motorhome, which might be fun if you just go like on the weekend for camping or something. But we were living in it. It's not very fun. And we also lived in sheds. So when I took my test to go to college, the ACT exam, we were living in a shed in the Ozarks with no running water. And my brother, just ahead of me, was born when the family didn't even have a motorhome or a shed. He was born in a tent. So I've also lived in a tent before when the family was with only 6 kids. A little smaller, but 8 people versus 10 people. So I say in the book, though, that it doesn't matter if you're poor. What matters was that we were also abused. Love is the most important thing, I think, in a strong family. If you have love, then you lift each other up and you can rise together as a family. But unfortunately, in our family, our dad was very abusive. And the thing is, he had been abused when he was a boy. And unfortunately, because my dad had his own victim mentality. And instead of defeating the victim mentality, he put it on us and he tried to push us down. And he would always, I know your dad doesn't do this to you, but let's just say if Matt would try to compete with you or tell your boys, don't try for that. Or what, like my dad told me once, he said, oh, Carrie, you'll never earn enough money to buy your own car. You'll never do that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's defeating.
That's mean.
Yeah. So to have a family, even if you're poor, like I said, but if you're loving and encouraging and lifting each other up, that's the most important thing I think you can give to a child and to your family. That's a more important legacy.
Speaking about how you said that your dad thought that you wouldn't have enough money to get a car, I heard that you grew up under a Mormon welfare system. What do you think about the government's welfare system?
Yeah, we had both the Mormon welfare and government sometimes. So we used both of them sometimes. We didn't do the welfare from the government as much as the Mormon one, in part because my dad did not want to let the government know what we were doing, because the government almost took us away. You know, they have child services that if the children are being abused, the government will come and take you away. So when I was 4 years old, one of the first memories that I had was the government came into our house and was going to take me and my siblings away. At that time, there were 6 of us instead of 8. We had the other 2 later. I was 4, but one of my first memories, the government said, we think your dad's abusing you. We might take you away. And my dad had programmed us to say, no, our dad's great. He's amazing. Don't take us away. And then we left and we went 2,000 miles away and we escaped from the government. So he was always a little bit afraid to use the government welfare. So we used more of the church welfare more often. I think what's happening right now with the state of government welfare is that, unfortunately, they say it's supposed to be what's called like a safety net. If you're falling, you need a net to catch you. That's what welfare is supposed to be. It's supposed to catch you when you fall. But unfortunately, it's become a spider web and people get stuck in it and it becomes a way of life. So a net is supposed to help you bounce back up and get back on your feet. But a web gets you trapped and then you get stuck in it. So unfortunately, I think that's the way our system has been designed, because some people want people to be trapped. It's very sad. And it actually
Yeah.
creates more of a victim mentality, our government system.
Yeah, I think that's
Wow.
it's a great way of describing it in terms of the net and bouncing back versus just becoming dependent on it permanently. And then we're not really helping people. It's actually really sad as a parent thinking of how vulnerable kids are, and for somebody to go through police coming in and taking them away from their parents and being programmed. Wow. How do you get over something like that?
Yeah.
Well, it took me a long time, and I went to a lot of therapy. I went to a lot of prayer circles and prayer meetings, and I also had a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety and just feeling like I didn't want to be alive. But I do believe that God is real, and I believe that God helped me. The more I would pray to him, the more I felt peace. And the more I say it's like a script in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
If you have lines that you're supposed to say in the script, that's in a lot of ways what the parent, so like, boys, your dad is like giving you a script that you say to yourself that you don't even know. You're programming yourself subconsciously. So,
Yeah.
but your dad and your mom, Lauren, they're giving you guys, I think, very positive and good scripts. So that when you're a grown up, if you go and watch this show we're having in 20 years, you'll see what I mean. Because you'll say, my dad and my mom gave me a good script in my head. And that script is becomes subconscious. And when you're abused, you have a script that I am evil, I am bad, I don't deserve to live, I deserve bad things. And it's a bad script. No parent should do that to their kids. So the way that I got out of it is that I gave myself a new script. And this is the script that I believe God wants for us. I deserve good things. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to have joy. I deserve to have peace in my life. I deserve to have a positive environment. I deserve to make money. I deserve to have a good job. I deserve to be loved. That's the new script. And so I had to put that in my head. And it's been a miracle.
That is a miracle. And not many people are self-aware enough to realize that they have to reprogram their script. And so kudos to you for doing that and becoming incredibly successful as a parent. And you mentioned like what we're doing with the kids. Part of what we did with kicking off this podcast was getting the boys involved in a variety of different conversations and trying to hence the name of the podcast is called Programming Lions. We want to program strong, confident generation to come. They got a lot coming at them with what we've set them up for, I think. Ultimately, it's really important to me, and this is why I left the corporate world to focus on this, because we really need to cultivate a strong next generation. And people like you are really inspiring for us. Let's segue a little bit into journalism and politics, where you spent a lot of your career. I wanted to ask you about, after you finished college, you had a number of things that you could have gone into, and you described some of this in your book, but ultimately you chose to pursue journalism. What was the deciding factor that drove you towards journalism?
Yeah, so I studied journalism in college, and I wrote my first article for a local newspaper when I was 17. And I was in high school, and they had this little section of the newspaper called Young Voices, where they let high school and college students write. And I'd always liked writing. And I said, maybe this is what I want to do for my major. And so by the time I graduated from college, I had 5 journalism internships. It became really exciting for me. I think for journalism, you have a front row seat to history. Part of why I got so many internships is because my dad, when I went to college, he said, "You're no longer my daughter," because he didn't want me to go. And he said, "If you go, you're going to be murdered if you leave." And he said, "If you go, you can never come home for Christmas, and you can never come home for summer breaks during college." So I was alone. And I took that as motivation to just work really hard. And I had my aunts and uncles nearby in college, so they were really kind to let me come home with them for holidays and things. But I took that rejection overall as an excuse to just work really hard. And so that's how I got all these great internships, is because I said, my roommates over here are going to go home and cuddle their teddy bears back home, and I'm going to get an internship. So I ended up interning for big places like Newsweek magazine, back when they had a print product. They had 3 million print products every week. And I also interned for Robert Novak, who was a really famous Washington Post columnist. And I had a passion for it. For journalism, you are shaping the way you think about things. Speaking of programming, you're programming a lot of just thoughts and ideas about policy and very important things for our society.
So you never saw your mom and dad or your brothers or whatever ever again?
I did eventually, but during college I wasn't allowed to. So eventually I had other siblings who left, because I was the first to leave. So I had 4 big brothers, and they were all still at home. And then when I got to be my senior year, one of my brothers attacked me. But he was sick. He has schizophrenia. So I knew it wasn't his fault, but I also knew I wasn't safe. And so I said, I want to go. And since I was the first to go, that's why he said, you can't come back. So I didn't go home to see them until it was almost 5 years before I was allowed. And by that point, I didn't sleep under their roof. So I've not slept under my parents' roof since I was 18, and I'm 41 now. I did go over a couple times, but it didn't go well as far as things my dad would say to me. So for a long time, I didn't even want to go over there. Initially, they said, you can't come here. And then I was like, well, I don't want to go over there. But the book is about forgiveness, though. So eventually, I did forgive my dad. And he's also very sick now. He has Alzheimer's, and he's 86 years old.
I want to ask you about just division a bit in the country, because you have access to a lot of different kind of stages and different people, but it seems that our country is becoming more divided than ever. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you think is happening, and what can we do about it in terms of bringing more unity back into the system?
There's an interesting book. The title is A New Earth, and it's by a guy named Eckhart Tolle. And the concept in it is what he calls primary and secondary purpose in life. And he says the primary purpose is to love each other. And that's actually the purpose why God created us. So you're first supposed to love yourself in a healthy way, not a selfish way. So you love yourself, you love your family, and then you love society. And that's the first purpose. And the second purpose, that's your work, that's your job, that's your politics, that's your business, that's secondary. And so often, especially when you see workaholics, they don't care about their family. For me, I was a workaholic, and I worked so hard that I didn't care about myself. And I ended up in the hospital because I worked too hard. And so I wasn't loving myself. I let my secondary purpose take over the primary purpose. And I think what's happening is the same thing, but at a much bigger level in our culture, in our politics. When people are yelling at each other and fighting each other, they're fighting about secondary purpose things.
Yeah.
And they need to be remembering, who is this person? It's my brother. It's my sister. If you believe in God like I do, this is a child of God just like me. And God loves them just as much as he loves me. He doesn't love me more than them, and he doesn't love me less. And so if someone attacks me and tries to put me down, nope, God loves me just as much as he loves you, and vice versa. I'm not going to put you down because we're equal. And that's, I think, the problem of American society is we've forgotten we're one nation under God. And if we start acting like that, we'll treat each other with more respect and love.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it. I like that.
On this podcast, we have covered very serious topics like crime, abortion, borders, stuff like that. So it seems like the current politics and things that have been made in the government are affecting this country a lot. How do you see all these policies and things?
I am very worried. Yeah, I think, for example, we have almost $35 trillion in debt. It's just a crazy number to think about. Like, how do you even think about that? Like, how do you
Giant number.
process that? You know, there's a great website called the U.S. Debt Clock. You can go there. And I'm looking at it right now. 34,681,728,000,000. It's just
It's
going
unfathomable. Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible.
It comes out to $266,000 per taxpayer.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't do that. We can't live that way. You guys are going to inherit this country from us. And I'm sorry. So we have to make some cuts. So that's one issue. And then we've got what's happening with national security. And I appreciate that you guys are doing this podcast in kids. Like, I think it's great. I think it's really important that you guys are leaders at such a young age. So I hope you keep doing it and don't let anyone discourage you.
Thank you. Yeah, we won't. So, what are the dangers of pop culture?
Ooh, pop culture.
So the word teenager is a luxury. The word teenager, or the concept of being a teenager, for the vast majority of human history, wasn't a thing. You were either a child or an adult. You weren't this kind of in between.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that we push people to do things that they can't handle, but I do think that part of why another problem we have in our culture is that we're below replacement rate.
Yeah.
As far as not having enough families with kids. You need at least 2.1 kids per female.
Yep.
In order for your species to not basically be zero eventually.
Yeah.
And so when you have this perpetual adolescence where people are not wanting to commit or settle down or have families or have kids, then your culture just becomes soft and everyone is detached, which is what's happening. People are isolated and they're depressed, they're mentally ill, and they're obese, and they're all on their phones. That's what America is becoming. And I think pop culture feeds a lot of that machine as far as this notion of perpetual adolescence. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't ever have fun, but I think a lot of pop culture sends messages that you have to behave a certain way, you have to look a certain way, you have to buy certain things. And pop culture feeds that so much. And the messages with pop culture, I don't think they're healthy, a lot of them. Should we be thinking critically about the people creating this culture? I think we should.
Amen to that.
I like that. I like that a lot. You've been on a lot of news networks, right? Like you've been on Fox, CNN. There's probably thousands of other networks I don't know of. Are there any hot conversations that you've had with anyone?
Oh, there have been a lot.
Any ones that you specifically remember? Like
I think one that went recently viral was a conversation that I had on CNN, and it was about what was happening in Florida with DEI and this idea of taxpayer money being used to divide people. We were talking about dividing people earlier.
Yeah.
I believe, like I said, we're all children of God, and that includes that God made us of different races. Like, so we shouldn't pretend or deny that people are different. And you also shouldn't deny someone being proud of their culture. So I think, for example, Black people, they should get their DNA tested if they want to understand more about their ancestry, to find out where they're from. I've done that for me, and I'm part Irish, and I love celebrating St. Patrick's Day. So
Irish.
there's nothing wrong with celebrating being Irish or part Irish. I'm mostly British. Sheffield's very British. So I don't think there's anything wrong if you want to celebrate where you're from and your ethnicity and your culture and your background. I think that's great. The problem is that it's been weaponized, and it's making some groups feel like they should be ashamed of where they're from, or ashamed of who they are. Or if you're a man, you should be ashamed because you're male, and that you automatically, just by being a white male, you are inherently a suppressor. That creates a lot of toxic interactions that is part of why we have such a division in our society today. I said the phrase Black Lives Matter, the concept is different from how the group that has been running this organization,
Indeed,
they've been under investigation for fraud,
Mhm.
for using money from donors for very extravagant things. People who are running the Black Lives Matter organization, I said, to me, it's different from the idea of saying, yes, Black lives, they do matter.
Of course.
And it's not something that should be hard to say. But I do have a problem when you have a group whose founder says she's proud that someone compared her book to Mao's Little Red Book. I have a problem with her ideology. I don't have a problem with her race. So I said that on CNN, and I was defending Governor Ron DeSantis, and it went viral. Got a lot of hate tweets, but I also got the attention of Ron DeSantis's team, and they flew me down to Florida, and I did an event with Governor DeSantis.
Oh, awesome.
Nice.
Awesome.
So in the end, all worked out for you.
Yep.
It worked out.
So since you've been on all these big networks, how do you prepare for all of these?
You know, it's funny because I've been doing it for about 10 years now. And when I first started, I prepared a lot more in the sense of I had so many things maybe typed out or written out.
Mhm.
And I still do that sometimes if it's like something really big. But for a lot of these now, they change the topic very suddenly. But I think the most important thing, and since you guys are building a show, and I think what you guys are doing good about doing your follow-ups, one of the things that I've learned is to listen. And I actually had some advice from when I was on the Bill Maher show. The executive producer said the best shows are when he said, I compare it to like building a bonfire. So everyone's got their wood. I'm coming, bringing some wood. And Matt has some wood he's bringing, and Will's bringing his wood, and Max brings, everyone's throwing some wood onto the bonfire. So we're all bringing our perspective, and then it grows into something bigger.
Yeah.
But the key to that is to listen. So instead of just coming in with your paper and saying, I want to do this and this and this, listening, that's how you get some of the most interesting and even funny or just newsworthy exchanges.
That's a good analogy in terms of the bonfire. I like that. And listening is, I tell the boys, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we talk. And I imagine, though, it's got to be a little bit nerve-wracking because you get on these shows, like Bill Maher, a great example. What are the possible topics? What are the derivatives of that topic that might get covered? How do I prepare? Do I have the right stats? Because the other person's going to throw out these stats. And all of that, I can just imagine it's a lot of preparation in terms of what the core topic is and what all the like ancillary tangent topics might be, huh?
Yeah, especially when I'm outnumbered. So if I'm on a very liberal
Which is
network,
most of the time, it seems like.
Yeah, I used to go, when I was living in New York, I used to go on, just as an example, Al Sharpton's show a lot. And he might have 4 or 5 against me on one. You know?
Yeah.
But this is one of those things, what you were saying earlier about taking a negative and flipping it and making it positive. I, at one point, after I was doing this for a while, told my dad, you know how you would scream at me? That's part of what trained me to go on TV and be screamed at, because I learned how to be calm because I had to be, because you were screaming at me, and I had to learn to defend myself from you. So I was able to take, like the Bible says in the story of Joseph, where Joseph took something intended for evil and use it for good. I'm not saying that you should yell at the boys, definitely not saying that. But I think if you want to do some simulations with debates and things like that, I would sometimes do that, where I would be watching live TV or pre-record or delay or whatever, and then I would just hit mute and say, what would I say in this time, in this moment? If I was sitting at that table, what would I say? And then I would practice that way.
I think we're going to do that. This is a great idea. Boys, I'm going to put this into our action plan. It also creates some fun around it, that we could create our own responses and perspective. I like the idea of practice debating. So you had, I would call a forced adversity situation on you, where you learned how to deal with somebody yelling at you and then being calm and turning it around. With our kids, this is something I actually worry about a bit, is we don't have that much adversity in our life. We've got, let's say, a great, loving family, and we have a lot of fun, and we're in a good position financially. So we try to sprinkle in intentional adversity into our lives, okay? So it might be something as simple as jumping in a cold plunge, like something you absolutely don't want to do. So if you got any other advice, I'll take it, because we don't want our kids to be soft, but we also don't want them to go through what you went through. So it's a balance of how do we get them adversity without, dropping the hood.
I think, yeah, because, two of my schools were in the hood and they were dangerous, and I would not recommend that.
Right.
I think one way is to immerse yourself in volunteering, where you can help people who are going through adversity. That can help you understand your mindset as far as having, because I think for a lot of people, there are some times when I actually have to pray. I'm like, God, give me empathy for people with no empathy. Because that's one thing coming through a very difficult childhood is I do have a very strong sense of empathy. I think it's not something that I would have chosen in terms of my childhood, but it's one positive thing that's come out of it. And so in the same way that you can go through either simulated adversity, especially for boys, like going into intense sports training, football or whatever, like that can create a really strong sense of resiliency and strong mental like visualization. I think that's a good avenue as well. Traveling abroad, putting yourself in foreign environments, that can create a sense of discomfort. So like always discomforting yourself. Like that's part of why I became a journalist, I think, is because I was always used to being in a different environment, being airdropped in as the new girl all the time. As a journalist, you get paid to do that. When you go into military, you go to basic training. A lot of people, and even the more intensive ones too, like SEAL training, a lot of people drop out. They can't handle it. I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine who was going through a divorce, and it's been very traumatizing for him. Divorce is one of the top life traumas. But I said, look, you had a loving childhood. Like, at least you had that positive sense of self-worth. And that, because to me, I struggled so much because I didn't have a loving childhood. So if I had to choose the default between building a loving child to know I have self-worth and I am inherently worthy versus abusing your child. So like for me, I always felt like I had to prove my dad wrong. Not at the end of the day, like a good motivation, because it ended up pushing myself too hard and I ended up in the hospital because I didn't feel worthy. So it's all about finding that balance, because you don't want to give everybody the participation trophy for doing nothing.
Right.
But at the same time, you do want to know I am worthy whether or not I'm achieving.
So I hear you played violin in the orchestra with my mom. Do you still play violin?
I do. Yes. I stopped playing for a while because I had bad feelings about it because my dad forced me to play it. But later on, after I became an adult, I still came back to it. And yeah, your mom played first violin in our orchestra and I played second violin. So she was playing the melody and I was playing the harmony. So I am actually going to play at my church on Mother's Day in 2 weeks.
What's the hardest song you've ever done?
I think when I was in the high school with your mom, that was probably the peak of my technical skills because I was playing the most around that time. And our teacher, Mr. Mosier, who I talk about in the book, he was very motivating. I actually said that year, my freshman year, was the best year of my childhood, was that year. And then it all just went downhill from there.
And now Max is playing guitar. So mom is helping you with reading music and getting going. And Max is becoming a pretty good guitar player. He's gonna charm a lot of ladies as he gets older, I'm sure.
He's okay with that. No.
Yeah, not yet. With that, we're going to transition into a segment that we've never done before, Carrie. But since we saw in your book that when you lived and participated in some inner city schools, you had to build a superpower around yo mama jokes. And so we understand you've got a few yo mama jokes. The boys have come up with their own. And so we wanted to have a little bit of a yo mama standoff. What do you think? Can we do that?
Ding, ding.
Yeah. I feel bad about this because I know your mom.
It's fine. She's not here.
With that, let's get going on the Yo Mama Smackdown.
Your mama's teeth are so yellow when she smells at traffic, it slows down.
Wow. Okay.
Your mama's so ugly that when she looked in the mirror, it said viewer discretion advised.
Oh. Okay. Your mama is so fat that when she got on the scale, It said, "I need your weight, not your phone number."
All right.
Okay.
Your mom is so fat, not even Dora can explore her.
That's a good one.
Okay.
I like that. That's creative. I
your
give you
mom-
points for that one.
Your mama's so old. She knew Burger King when he was a prince.
Ah. I like that. The mama is so fat. I took a picture of her last Christmas and it's still printing.
Oh, look at the shock here. Look at the shock and awe.
Oh,
That was crazy. Holy smoke. Okay, that was a good one.
all right. Your mom is so fat, her blood type is ragu.
Ragu?
Okay. Your mama's so dumb she failed a survey.
I
Really
actually
dumb
think a lot of
failing
people
those.
might do that too. That they don't know how to fill in the bubbles. Your mom is so fat and old that when God said, "Let there be light," he asked your mother to move out of the way.
Oh my gosh.
Max, I don't know. I don't think you guys are I need you guys
this
to
is
go
hard.
harder
Okay,
here.
fine,
Max.
fine. I'll have
Joe Mama, all right, Joe Mama's so dumb that when the court said order in the court, she asked for a large fries and a shake.
Oh,
Okay.
Max.
I like
This
that. I
one.
like that.
I'm gonna destroy it this one. Okay. Your mama's so old. She has an autographed Bible.
Ooh.
Okay. Your mom is so fat that her belly button gets home 15 minutes before she does.
Oh, my.
That's just
Wow. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Ooh.
Your mama, all right. Your mama's so ugly when she entered an ugly contest. They said, "Sorry, no professionals."
Ooh, snap. That's a good one.
Nice. Your mama's so fat when she jumped in the ocean. The whales sang, "We are family."
even though you're fatter than me.
You know what? I think that wins because they sang and they did a little dance.
We are family.
Even though you're fatter than me.
All right, that was amazing. This is
That was way better
first
than
in
rapid
programming
fire.
lines history. Yo mama standoff. Not everybody, is ready for that. So thanks, Carrie, for entertaining the Yo Mama jokes.
That was awesome.
Any final words of advice for our audience or these two young lads that you could leave us with?
I think what you guys are doing is wonderful and it's so needed because there's unfortunately these lessons that you're teaching and the values aren't going to be taught in schools, and in fact the opposite. So I just want to encourage you guys, keep doing what you're doing, especially as boys. I think boys are under attack in our culture, that there's something wrong with you if you're a boy when you're just being a boy. And so keep being you, keep being who God made you to be. And I think what
will.
you're doing is really awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great encouragement. So with that, why don't we call it a wrap? And I want to leave a couple of things in the description. So Carrie's book, Motorhome Prophecies, is just out. It's a bestseller. Check it out. I'll leave a link to it in the description. And Carrie, we wish you, there it is. And we wish you all the luck on your continued tour and the rest of your career. We'll stay in touch, I'm sure. So thanks again for coming on and best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for coming
Thank
on.
you guys.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe, like, comment, share. It really makes a difference for us. Thank you. Until next time.